I never imagined I'd be explaining FAA regulations in the middle of a pristine suburban driveway at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, but life has a strange way of rearranging your priorities. One minute I was cruising above Seattle's outskirts on my usual commute to Stratosphere Technologies headquarters, the next, a sudden wall of thick fog swallowed the sky, forcing me into an emergency landing in the heart of Maplewood Heights. The rotors of my Bell 429 helicopter were still winding down, mist curling around its sleek frame, when I heard it, a shrill, commanding voice slicing through the damp morning air. "Sir, you have exactly 5 seconds to move this thing before I call the police." I turned slowly, bracing myself. There she stood, her perfectly highlighted bob quivering with outrage, designer bathrobe cinched tight, and a phone camera pointed straight at my face like a weapon. I had heard stories about Karen Whitfield, most pilots in the area had. Her name came up often at aviation clubs, always in the same breath as noise complaints, exaggerated threats, and impossible demands. But standing here now, facing the self-declared queen of the cul-de-sac in person, was something else entirely. Behind her, a growing crowd of neighbors shuffled in slippers, clutching coffee mugs, some curious, others embarrassed. I could practically feel their unspoken apologies through the fog. "Ma'am, I understand this is unusual," I began, keeping my voice measured as I secured the aircraft, "but FAA regulations clearly permit emergency landings under." She cut me off with a dismissive flick of her manicured hand. "I am Karen Whitfield, president of the Maplewood Heights HOA, and this is a violation of at least 15 neighborhood covenants." She turned her phone toward me again, recording every second. "This is a historic neighborhood. We have noise restrictions, and no commercial aircraft are allowed within residential boundaries." Some neighbors nodded hesitantly, others shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. "Miss Whitfield," I said evenly, "this is temporary. My pilot is en route to relocate the aircraft as soon as the fog lifts." "FAA protocol." "I don't care about your protocols," she spat, already dialing. "I'm calling the police, the FAA, and the mayor." From across the street, a tall man in a monogrammed robe, Judge Grant, if I remembered correctly, winced. "Karen, maybe we should." She ignored him, raising her voice for the benefit of her phone's microphone. "This man has landed a commercial aircraft in our peaceful community, endangering families and children." The hyperbole would have been laughable if I wasn't standing there freezing and caffeine-deprived. This woman was declaring war. By the time I finally made it back to my office in downtown Seattle, the fog had long since lifted, but the storm brewing in Maplewood Heights was only just beginning. My assistant, Sam Brooks, was already waiting with a fresh double espresso and a concerned expression. She placed the cup on my desk, along with a neatly organized folder labeled Maplewood Heights Incident, Complete Documentation. Sam didn't miss details, and today, that attention to detail was going to prove invaluable. She slid into the chair across from me and exhaled. "You've got 17 emails from residents. 15 complaints, 2 apologies. Some are colorful." I sipped the espresso and nodded. "Figures." She tapped the folder. "I've compiled everything, FAA statutes, your emergency landing clearance documentation, and a timeline. But Ethan, there's something else." She turned her laptop toward me. The local news was already running with the story. Karen Whitfield, standing in front of her immaculate colonial, spoke to the camera with dramatic fervor. "Residents are living in fear," she declared, gesturing wildly. "Imagine sipping your morning coffee when a helicopter roars overhead, shattering tranquility and endangering lives." The footage panned to a group of worried-looking neighbors, most of them elderly, many nodding in agreement. Sam muted the video. "It gets worse." She opened a social media feed. The hashtag helicopter Karen was trending, but not in the way you might think. Half the posts mocked her entitlement. Memes of helicopters photoshopped over suburban brunches, jokes about airspace policing. But the other half? Support for Karen, framing me as a tone-deaf billionaire disrupting ordinary lives. Investors had started calling, too. Sam handed me a summary email from our investor relations team. Several shareholders expressed concern about potential reputational damage. All it would take was one viral headline: "Tech billionaire terrorizes quiet neighborhood." I pinched the bridge of my nose. She was winning in the court of public opinion. Sam wasn't finished. "I did some digging," she said, leaning forward. "You'll want to see this." Flight logs. Karen had chartered helicopters herself, multiple times in the past year. Luxury trips to private vineyards, a spa retreat in Napa Valley, even a real estate showcase in Montana. I blinked. She's been screaming about air traffic, while riding helicopters? Sam grinned tightly. Hypocrisy, served on a silver platter. Before I could react, my phone buzzed with a call from Judge Grant. I answered. "Ethan," he said, his voice heavy, "I've lived in that neighborhood for 20 years. Karen's been weaponizing the HOA for years, fines, threats, bending rules to fit her needs. But here's the kicker, she's selling her house next month. Renovations have been going on for over a year, and she's planning to set a record-breaking price. Your helicopter threatens her entire marketing pitch." I leaned back in my chair, letting it sink in. This wasn't about noise. It was about control and money. "There's more," Judge Grant continued. "She's been preying on elderly residents, scaring them with false stories about drone airports and aerial accidents. She's got them terrified into compliance." The pieces snapped into place. Karen wasn't just angry, she was orchestrating a full-blown campaign to protect her personal interests, using lies and manipulation to whip the community into a frenzy. I turned to Sam. "Prepare everything. We're going to that HOA meeting. But first, send the flight records to the press. Let's see how she likes a taste of her own medicine." By the time evening fell over Maplewood Heights, the community center parking lot was packed, cars spilling out onto side streets. The building buzzed with anxious conversation as homeowners streamed inside, clutching copies of HOA meeting agendas and Karen's alarmist flyers. I slipped in quietly, taking a seat in the back row, unnoticed by most, but not for long. At the front of the room, Karen Whitfield stood at the podium, flawless in a tailored navy suit, her smile polished but cold. She clicked through a slide presentation projected onto the wall behind her. Each chart more dramatic than the last, showing supposed declines in property values tied to neighborhoods with frequent overhead air traffic. "The research is clear," she declared, though not a single source was cited. "If we allow this helicopter harassment to continue, we can expect a 15% drop in home values within the year." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Faces tightened with concern. Karen's fear-mongering was working. I glanced around, noticing how many elderly couples looked genuinely distressed. My jaw clenched. She had manipulated them masterfully. And then she saw me. Her gaze locked on mine, a flicker of surprise passing over her face before she recovered with a venomous smile. "Well, well. Our uninvited guest has decided to grace us with his presence." Heads turned. Conversations stilled. The entire room seemed to tilt toward me, tension crackling. I hadn't intended to speak. But the moment demanded it. I rose slowly, meeting Karen's gaze without flinching. "I didn't come to disrupt," I began calmly. "I came to correct." I pulled out my tablet and connected it to the projector. The screen behind Karen flickered, replacing her manipulated graphs with flight records, records of her own private helicopter trips. The room gasped. I continued, my voice steady. "Mrs. Whitfield has repeatedly used private helicopter services, for leisure, for business, even while publicly denouncing aerial traffic as dangerous and disruptive. Karen's smile vanished. She opened her mouth to protest, but I raised a hand. That's not all. I tapped the screen again, displaying scanned copies of HOA fine notices. Dozens of them. Arbitrary and excessive fines imposed on homeowners who dared question her authority. Fines for trivial violations, mailbox colors, garden decorations, driveway stains. All conveniently targeted toward those who refused to support her agenda. A man in the second row stood up, his face red with anger. She fined me $200 for parking my daughter's car in the driveway overnight. She said it ruined the aesthetic. A woman chimed in. She threatened to report me to animal control because my bird feeder was attracting pests. The room erupted into angry whispers. But I wasn't done. One last detail. My legal team uncovered documentation linking Karen to a pending deal with Vertex Technologies, a direct competitor to Stratosphere. The agreement? If community pressure forced me to sell my airspace rights at a loss, she would personally broker the sale for a hefty commission. Gasps turned into outrage. Karen's composure finally cracked. That's a lie. She shrieked. But the room had turned. Judge Grant stood slowly. Karen, I think it's time you sat down. Reporters who had slipped in unnoticed now stepped forward, cameras flashing. I turned to the crowd. I didn't come here to fight. I came to clarify. I respect this community, and I've followed every regulation. But you deserve to know the truth about who's been manipulating you. The silence that followed was heavy and electric. Karen shrank into her chair, her carefully curated facade crumbling. And just like that, the neighborhood's queen fell from grace. The fallout from the HOA meeting was swift and merciless. By morning, local news vans crowded the entrance to Maplewood Heights, but they weren't there to report on helicopter noise anymore. Headlines screamed about Karen Whitfield's hypocrisy, her intimidation tactics, and her secret deal with Vertex Technologies. Footage of the meeting spread like wildfire, and her polished image as the selfless community protector was replaced by one of greed and manipulation. I had expected her to retreat, but Karen was nothing if not tenacious. My attorney, David Harper, called later that afternoon with news that only confirmed what I suspected. The city had suspended all of Karen's pending development applications. Her plans for a luxury condo complex, one that had violated height restrictions by nearly 30 feet, were dead in the water. Worse for her, the documents had been submitted with outdated zoning maps and falsified variance approvals. Permit fraud. Serious charges if pursued. I sat in my office, staring out at the Seattle skyline, weighing my next move. It would have been easy to crush her completely, but something in me hesitated. There was a fire in Karen, a ruthless drive I recognized in myself from years past. Misguided, yes. Dangerous, definitely. But not without potential if redirected. David interrupted my thoughts. She's vulnerable, Ethan. If you want to force a settlement, now's the time. But I had something different in mind. 3 days later, under heavy rain clouds that matched the mood of the day, Karen arrived at Stratosphere headquarters. Her usual confidence was dulled, her mascara slightly smudged, and her once pristine blouse creased at the cuffs. She was unraveling, but still defiant. Her attorney flanked her, but I raised a hand before he could speak. I'd like to speak with Ms. Whitfield alone first. Karen gave a curt nod. Fine. Inside my office, I didn't waste time. Your development plans were ambitious. Innovative, even. The environmental elements, carbon-negative rooftops, community gardens, impressive. She blinked, caught off guard by the compliment. You've read them? I did. And I think you're wasting your energy fighting battles you can't win when you could be building something extraordinary. Her posture softened, curiosity replacing suspicion. I pulled up renderings on my screen of a riverfront property Stratosphere owned, one already zoned for mixed-use development, with no height restrictions and pre-approved permits. I told her we could partner. Her design expertise, my technology and resources. No more games, no more manipulation. Something real. She stared at the plans, biting her lip, calculation clear in her eyes. Why would you offer me this? You could destroy me. Because talent is harder to find than victory, I answered simply. And because I believe even opponents can become allies with the right opportunity. Thunder rumbled outside, the storm growing heavier. She was on the verge of answering when my emergency line rang. I picked up, Sam's voice urgent. Ethan, there's been a landslide in Maplewood Heights. Several homes are at risk, Judge Grant's included. Karen's face paled. His house backs onto the ravine. If that hillside gave way. I was already on my feet. Prep the helicopter for emergency response, I ordered over the intercom. Karen's eyes narrowed. You're going up in this storm? I have to. She hesitated only a second before stepping forward. I'm coming with you. I know which homes have elderly residents, who'll need help first. As we hurried to the rooftop helipad, my pilot whispered something that stopped me cold. Ethan, for the record, the evacuation delay? Karen refused to approve the community center as a staging area, citing liability concerns. I glanced back at her. She met my gaze with something between guilt and resolve. And in that moment, I knew, no matter what good she could do now, betrayal had already left its mark. The storm battered us from all sides as the helicopter sliced through sheets of rain and swirling wind, the city lights below distorted by water and fog. Karen sat beside me, unusually silent, her fingers gripping the seatbelt strap tight across her lap. Below us, the ravine behind Maplewood Heights had given way, sending a wall of mud and debris crashing against the backyards of 4 homes. Emergency vehicles struggled to access the area, their flashing lights half swallowed by fallen trees and blocked roads. The Thompson residence, Judge Grant's home, was teetering on the edge, half the backyard already swallowed by the landslide. My pilot held the craft steady as I coordinated with ground teams over the radio. The situation was grim, rising water, unstable terrain, and multiple elderly residents trapped inside homes. Karen leaned forward, scanning the chaos below. Land there, she said, pointing to a patch of solid ground near the park. There's drainage infrastructure underneath, it'll hold. My pilot executed a near-perfect landing despite the punishing wind, and we stepped out into knee-deep water as emergency personnel rushed toward us. For the next 2 hours, my helicopter became an airlift shuttle, transporting residents, many frail and terrified, to safety at a nearby hospital. Karen didn't stop moving either. She organized ground volunteers, directed first responders to the most vulnerable residents, and even waded through waist-deep water to check on an elderly couple who hadn't responded to calls. For the first time, I saw her not as an adversary but as someone who genuinely cared about her community. Though her methods had been flawed, her dedication was real. The following morning, the rain had eased, but the storm around Karen was far from over. Media vans surrounded her home. Emergency service reports confirmed that she had initially refused to authorize the community center as an evacuation hub, delaying critical response efforts by nearly 3 hours. The headlines were brutal: HOA president endangered residents for bureaucratic control. Angry neighbors flooded social media, calling for her resignation. My PR team released a short, carefully worded statement expressing gratitude to emergency responders and reaffirming our commitment to working with the community. No gloating, no finger-pointing. Karen's downfall was writing itself. By the end of the week, she had stepped down from her HOA presidency, her real estate listings removed from every major platform, and her once pristine reputation left in ruins. Watching it unfold, I couldn't help but wonder, was she ever really the villain, or just someone so blinded by control and pride that she lost sight of the people she claimed to protect? Have you ever felt powerless against HOA, or Karen, rules? Share your experiences below. Let's see who had it worse.